Who's this guy?
Whoa! Glasses.
Hey everybody!
Hi guys.
We are here for another week of Unscripted. My name's Emily and this is Brian.
You're back.
Well, I'm back, yes.
Woo!
Got back and now we are continuing talking about, so these past couple Sundays we've been in a sermon series that I've really enjoyed called I Was Only Trying to Help.
Yeah, now, quick tangent. You don't have to have watched our most recent messages or have been there for what we're about to talk about, I think.
Right, exactly. So each week we've kind of taken a sentence or like a phrase that people say when they think they're helping, but we've kind of talked about how maybe that either isn't like super like theologic, what am I trying to say?
Theologically.
Thank you, sound. Or how it really sometimes does more damage than it does good. And I think it's just been a really impactful sermon for people. And I think people have really, I know it's been, with me.
I really love the series. I've only shared in one of the three so far. But God Needed Another Angel was one of the ones we talked about. And as a response when someone has a loved one that dies.
Yeah.
And then thoughts and prayers as a phrase that people kind of say, you know, to those.
They kind of just throw it out there when they don't know what else to say.
Right.
Kind of a thing.
And then this past week we talked about everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
That idea.
Yep. And then this upcoming Sunday we're going to be talking about how God only helps those who help themselves.
Yes.
But there's so many other ones that we could have talked about.
A lot.
But we only had so many weeks. So I was going to throw one of the ones that we didn't end up having time in just to kind of get your quick thoughts on it.
There's always money in the banana stand. Is that it?
Not quite. What show is that from for people for reference?
Arrested Development.
Brian really likes it. So
such a great show.
If you ever want to be able to have a conversation with Brian, watch that show. He'll talk about it for a long time.
But still, that's not a great... we're going to take up over time.
I was going to say, I'm going to ask you the actual question I have, which is, so what do you think of the saying when you hear that people say they hate the sin, but not the sinner?
Hate the sin, love the sinner.
Love the sinner. Hate the sin, love the sinner.
Well, I think that the idea behind that, like all of these, it's coming out of a place where you want to be helpful. You know, you're trying to say something that will help people get past something or grow in a way that, you know, out of compassion. But I think with hate the sin, love the sinner, what you can get into is sometimes people don't feel like they can separate things that they do with who they are. And I think that can be something that can be tricky. You need to be able to have a conversation with someone about something in depth that they're struggling with, or that they're just, maybe that's who they are, more than just a quip, hate the sin, love the sinner, and then like all of a sudden that should explain everything you are trying to say. Right,
because I think when I hear that phrase, I often hear it kind of as like an excuse, or kind of almost like a get out of jail free card, of almost kind of like people say it as in like that explains the whole situation, so now we don't really have to address it or talk about it.
Right, yeah.
And then, but yeah, like what you're saying is like, no, like this goes way deeper than this, and like we need to be able to have these conversations and talk about it, and not just kind of put this Band-Aid over it of like, well, I'm not actually going to talk about it, but I still love you.
Yeah, because I think if you were to have a conversation with someone who, if you would refer, I don't know, you're in a conversation and one person says, hate the sin, love the sinner, that's where I stand, then to be able to explain and go into depth more, I think is really a needed thing, so that you could maybe build some common ground if the other person's like, but that doesn't sound like you actually love the sinner or whatever. Right,
because I think, and I mean, a lot of times this is used around very like sensitive and very personal subjects. Like you're talking about people and like they're like So, but this is a part of me, or like I've done these things in the past,
Yeah.
or because I think that a lot of times this conversation can be around the LGBTQ plus community, but it can also be around other things like, oh, well, you've made bad decisions in your past, and I don't like those, but I still love you too. Like, I think that you can compare it to both situations.
Yeah.
But no matter what you're comparing it to, it's a very sensitive situation to be able to just like paint over with this, like, but don't worry, I still love you.
Yeah.
Kind of mentality.
And that's where I think context for the situation is key. You know, who are you talking with, and what's the subject about? Like with the LGBTQ plus community, they take issue with that. They as in that community and allies, right? Taking up issue with that because they say, listen, I can't separate that sort of thing. And so to say hate the sin but love the sinner, they don't hear the second part of that. And so I think that regardless of where you stand on that issue, there's a lot of common ground that you need to build. And if you toss out this quip of hate the sin, love the sinner, that's a big hurdle for people.
You're not, again, like the whole sermon is illustrating, you're not helping the situation. You basically ended a conversation before you can even really begin the conversation.
But then like in a different situation, say someone, murders another person, I can't fathom how a parent of the person who committed the murder can love their child. Like, I mean, I get that as a dad, but just as a human, but that's a murky situation too, because like you said earlier, it's not just a get out of jail free card. So does that make sense?
It does. Well, yeah, like how can you wrestle with those emotions of like, how do you reconcile, to use like that bigger, like how do you reconcile what you've done in your past with like the person that like, you're still my child, you're still somebody I love, but like how do I reconcile these other things that you've done in your life? And
I think that's what's so radical about Jesus's grace and forgiveness and love is he would say, you love a person who committed murder. And for us, whether we're tied to that situation or not, that's like, wow, but this person did this, And so it's, to me, what this phrase, hate the sin, love the sinner, falls short of is how radical and challenging Jesus's forgiveness is for all of us. Just, when I feel like I'm pretty good at forgiving, maybe I come up to a scenario, and I can't think of one off the top of my head, where all of a sudden I'm like, I don't want to forgive that person, let alone if it's something that would be like an atrocity committed against me or someone I care about.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, well, I mean, this is a way bigger conversation than we have time to unpack in our
life is complicated.
Yes, and it's so complicated. But that's why these are great conversations for us to kind of just digest a little bit. In the comments, if there is any others, because like I said, we're finishing up this sermon series this next upcoming Sunday, but there are so many other things that we could have talked about. So if you've ever experienced any of those, like maybe somebody said something to you that they were trying to help, but it did not resonate, go ahead and drop those in. And I think that would be a great conversation too, just to continue the conversation of how can we best actually help people opposed to these get out of free jail cards.
Or even, what do you think about this whole hate the sin, love the sinner? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comment feed, or reach out to us about it. So
and until next time, we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.